Hey everyone, it's Mr. G. Thanks again for joining me today for another art project. Today we're going to be creating a line rhythm sunset. And this project is going to deal with using lines to both create our palm trees, but also to create the principle of design rhythm, which you can see going on in my background. For this project, you're going to need a piece of paper, a pencil, and then you're also going to need 3 warm color markers, which are going to be red, orange, and yellow. And then you're also going to need a black crayon or a black marker as well. Now, if you don't have these exact supplies, if you're using colored pencils or using crayons for everything, that's okay. But I do recommend that you have those warm colors for your background. So gather up your supplies and get ready to create. The first thing I want to talk with you about today is one of our principles of design in art, and that is going to be rhythm. Now, rhythm is a word you might have heard before, but you probably often think of music when you think of rhythm. In art, rhythm is like a continuation, a flow, or a feeling of movement achieved by repeating kind of something over and over again. And in the case of this project, we're going to be doing a line rhythm. Okay, so we're going to be doing a rhythm of line. So it's going to be a repetition, but it's also going to give kind of a sense of movement. This can be difficult to do if you don't take your time. It's important that when you do a line rhythm that you take your time because you want your lines to match up as you draw them. So for example, if I draw my first line like this, but I just ignore this when I do my next line, it's not going to have that visual movement to it. So if I do something like this, okay, the second line doesn't match up with it, and then it kind of messes up the rhythm. So then if I do another line, and I'm trying, and it just doesn't quite match as well, it's gonna kind of be more of an abstracted rhythm. But if you want to have a really nice continuous visual flow to your lines, take your time. And we're going to do a curvy line rhythm today. So it's just a real gentle curve. So I'm just moving my hand slowly and just adding a couple little dips or high points to my line. Now when I do my next line, it's going to be close to that line, and I'm just going to follow this line here and try to match it as best as I can. It's okay if it's not exact, but do your best. And by taking your time, it's going to work out much better. So when this line above it goes down, I'm going to dip this line down. When it goes up, I'm going to dip that line up. Okay, and I'm keeping it pretty close together. So when I do my next line, again, the same thing. When the line dips down, I dip down. When it goes up, I go back up. And so I'm trying to achieve that same rhythm over and over again. But if I start putting more and more space between my line or really rushing through it, okay, it's not going to have kind of the tightness, that really good sense of movement and rhythm that my first few lines had. So keep that in mind when you're doing your line rhythms for your background of our palm tree sunset sky. Okay. Now the other thing I want to talk about is drawing the palm trees. Okay, so with your palm trees, we're going to start out with just a few simple lines, and then we're going to kind of thicken up these lines to make them look more like a palm tree. So for the tree trunk, I like to do a kind of a curved tree trunk, like the tree trunk's kind of bending instead of just doing a straight up and down line. So I like to again add a little more movement to the trees, like they've been swaying in the wind maybe on that ocean breeze. So that will be my tree trunk here, and then on top of that line I'm going to have 4 curved lines that are kind of frowning down. Okay, so 1, 2, and then always starting from the top of the tree trunk line, I'm going to come up here and do 3 and 4. Okay, so right now it's starting to look like a palm tree, but it's not quite there yet. To make it look more like a palm tree, I'm going to thicken this line so I can either draw next to it and color it in, or I can just kind of draw on either side of it and thicken that line up like so. And then I'm also going to thicken each of these leaves as well, just by kind of coloring over them a little bit. Okay, so now it's looking even more like a palm tree. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some separation to the leaves. So just using short little lines on the bottom curve of each of my leaves. So short little up and down lines, just little hash marks, like so. And there's my completed palm tree. Okay, So when I do this on my actual paper, I'm going to be using a crayon for the palm trees, a black crayon, and I'm going to use markers for the sky. The reason I'm using a crayon for the palm trees and markers for the sky is that if my markers go through my palm trees at any point, the ink isn't really going to smear. Whereas if I use a black marker, you might find, like with a yellow marker especially, that your colors kind of smear and the black gets on that yellow marker and it kind of smears the color. Where a black crayon will more resist the marker and it won't have that effect as much. Now, if you only have markers or if you're using something like colored pencils, that's different. But if you have the ability to use a black crayon for your palm trees and a marker for your sky, I think you're going to be more pleased with your results. But again, use whatever you have available at home. But I'm going to be using, again, a black crayon for my palm trees and then color markers for my sky. And the reason we're doing our palm trees black is because that's called a silhouette. So that's like a shadow. So the sunset, the sky, the light from the sky is kind of being cast behind the palm trees, creating it look more black and dark. So that's called kind of a silhouette, when it's kind of like the object looks more like a shadow. So it's going to be darker with that. Okay. All right. So I have my paper and pencil, and I'm going to start with that before I start using my different color mediums. So what I'm going to do with my pencils, I'm going to lay in a ground line or a horizon line here, and that's going to be kind of what the palm tree trunks are going to be sitting on. I'm also going to have kind of a setting sun down here as well. That's going to just be an arched line, kind of like a rainbow line or a half of a circle, just like the sun is setting below the horizon, and then my line rhythm will be up above and around that sun. So again, you'll notice my paper is turned up and down vertically. This is going to give me a little more height to my sky so I can have more line rhythm. If you'd rather have your paper turned horizontally, this is called landscape. And when you're doing an outdoor scene, you would typically have it probably this way. But in this case, kind of one of our main focuses is the sky and that line rhythm. And so I want to have a little more focus on that up here. So that's why I'm turning it this way, so I can have more room for that. But you can decide which way will work best for you. If you do it this way, you can probably have more palm trees going across your paper. Whereas if I have it this way, it's a little shorter and I can't fit as many palm trees. So you make that decision as the artist. But again, I'm going to have it in what is actually called portrait style, up and down vertically. But that's, again, just so I have more focus on the sky. So just about an inch or so above the bottom of my paper, I'm going to have my ground line or horizon line. I don't want to have this too high because then it's going to push up my palm trees really high, and that's going to get in the way of my sky where I'm going to have a lot of my line rhythm. Okay. I'm also going to really lightly lay in a half circle. Now, if you have something that's a circle shape, like maybe you have a roll of masking tape or a small bowl or something like that, you can kind of put that and trace around that edge. I'm just going to freehand it really lightly, like so. And that way, it's not going to, again, it's not going to go too high. But if you have something that is circular, you can trace that and have a perfect curve. But that looks pretty good to me, and I'm just going to stick with that. And that way, if you don't have something at home, you can see, just take your time, just try to do your best of an arch line or a rainbow line, just like your first line of a rainbow there. That's starting on one part of your ground line and then over to this part here. Okay, so think about that. I'm going to erase this little line here. Okay, so now I'm going to get into coloring my horizon line first, my ground here. So I'm going to use a black marker for this. Again, I am going to use a crayon for the palm trees, but my line rhythm isn't going to come down into the ground down here. So I can use a marker for that. It'll color a little more quickly. Kind of outline the edge of my paper here so I don't get too much marker on the table. I'll just fill that in. If you're using something different than a black marker, that's okay too. But our ground and our palm trees are what's going to be black. Okay, so I've got that there. Touch up these corners just a little bit. Okay, so now I'm going to color in my sun with a yellow marker. So I'm going to outline here, outline along the bottom of it, and then just fill that in with yellow. We are going to be using, again, warm colors for our sunset sky. So yellow will be down near the ground line, since that matches the setting sun here, and then orange will be in the middle, and then red will be up on the top part. Now with this yellow, you can see that you can kind of still see my pencil lines a little bit. That's okay. If you want to outline this with black, you can do that too. I'm going to leave it just like that. I'm going to use my pencil for my palm trees first to make sure they kind of look how I want them to look, and then I can go over them with my black crayon. So I'm going to have one over here on the left side. Again, I'm going to curve my line a little bit there, and they can be different heights. Some can be shorter, some can be smaller. Do a smaller one here over my sun. Maybe have it curve a little bit more actually. Another one right there. Okay, so I'm going to have 3 on my image here. I'm going to have my leaves. So again, on the top of each of my lines, I'm going to have 4 kind of frowning lines or rainbow curved lines. Start again at the point here in the middle, come up with 2 more. Okay, do the same thing over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so now I'm going to use my crayon, my black crayon, to color over that and thicken up the line. So I'm going to first go over the line here, but then I'm going to thicken it up, especially near the bottom. The top might stay a little bit more thin, but the base of the tree trunk is going to be the thickest. I'm just going to do all the tree trunks first. So notice how I'm outlining the line I drew, and then just going over it and thickening up the line a little bit, especially at the bottom. Just kind of following the curve of those. Okay, now I'm going to go over my leaves, and I'm going to outline them first. And then thicken them up just a little bit. First one's looking good. Move on to my next one. Thicken each of those leaves up. And the last one here, and then remember, for the leaves, you're going to have short little lines as well, little dash marks that are coming down from each leaf, kind of up and down, or maybe at an angle a little bit. Just have little marks coming down, like so, just to give a little texture, visual texture to each of the leaves. And then once you're done with those palm trees, and again, you might have more than 3, maybe you have less, maybe yours are a little bit taller. That's okay if they're coming up taller, but again, as of right now, my paper is only about halfway used. I've got still half the paper that's being reserved for my line rhythm to really get me in a good groove, but I am going to bring my line rhythm all the way down to my sun as well. So getting up next, I'm going to have my 3 warm colors. So yellow will be used kind of down here near the palm trees. Orange will be more in the middle area. Oh, they're rolling on me. And then red will be up here near the top. Okay, so I'm going to start with red. And this first line I do is really the most important because it's going to set the stage of what the rest of my lines are going to look like. So you know what? Instead of using my marker right from the get-go, I'm going to use a pencil first. That way, if I don't like the way my line looks, I can erase it and redo it, but I can outline it with the red marker. So again, I'm going to take my time, just do a really gentle curve to it. Going down a little bit, going up a little bit. Just going across my paper like that. I like the way that looks, and so I'm going to leave it just like that. Now, if your line is too bumpy, let me flip over to the back of my paper. If your line's really bumpy like this, sometimes I see students do like a line rhythm like this where it's really bumpy. It might look neat, but I'll tell you what, that as you continue your line rhythm, it gets really hard to fit in these little tiny bumps, and it makes it a lot harder. And especially when if you start speeding up by accident, then it really start, kind of getting in the way of what the rhythm should look like. So by having your line much more slow and a gentle curve to it, it makes it much easier to follow along that. So keep that in mind when you're doing your line rhythm lines. But again, it might not look just like mine. Everybody's line rhythms are usually different. I'm going to do this first one now with my red marker and go over that. Okay. I'm also going to go above it just a little bit since I do have a little space here. I'm going to go above it a little bit there, just filling in this top part. Notice I don't have the whole line there, but I am still following the curve of this first line. Now I'm going to go below it the rest of the way, and that's when it gets a little bit easier than touching up that top. So again, I'm going to stay close to my line, but again, I'm taking my time and really making sure that when my line dips down, I dip down with this new line. When it goes up, I go up. So I'm starting here on the left side. I go up a little bit, then I go down a little bit, up a little bit, down a little bit. Okay, so right now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 red lines. I'm gonna do 1 or 2 more. And I'm keeping my lines also close together to give that more sense of a visual movement to my artwork. Okay, I'm gonna add 1 more red one, then I'll go on to orange. All right, that looks pretty good. Now notice that my bumps are not as wide as they originally were because I'm kind of filling in a little bit. So you might have that a little bit where your lines kind of straighten out a little bit, and that's okay. Switch to my orange marker now. So again, same thing. Even though I'm using a new color, I'm still following the line above it. So that red transitions nicely into orange. I'm going to do a few of these lines, and then I'm going to finish up with yellow. Now as I get to my palm trees, I can draw through my palm trees since I'm using a marker over crayon palm trees. If you did marker for your palm trees and you're using a marker now for your background, keep in mind that the ink might kind of smear with each other. So just be aware of that. Okay, I'm going to switch over to yellow now for the rest of the way. So I got red, orange, and then yellow. Just kind of following the curve now. Just kind of ignore your palm trees right now and just remember to follow the curve of each of your lines. I'm drawing right through them. If you do notice you get a little black crayon on your marker, just kind of flip it over to the back and kind of just do a little scribble, and you can kind of clean it off. You can see a little bit of black here, so if you just kind of scribble it, it'll clean off the marker tip. Even though my marker tip still looks like it has black on it, it's not really showing up as much once I do a little scribble on it. Okay, so now here's another tricky part. I'm into my sun now, so when I get to my sun, I'm just going to stop here. I'm going to hop over and finish the line over on this side. So I'm going to stop right there. I'm not going to draw through the sun. Come over to this side too. You know what, I guess if you do draw through your sun because it's yellow, I guess it doesn't really matter. So you could stop and hop, or you can just draw through it as long as you're using the same color you did for your sun. And there you have it. There is a line rhythm sunset sky with these beautiful palm tree silhouettes. using warm colors, red, orange, and yellow for my sun and my sky, and just using a black marker or crayon for my palm tree silhouette, having a cool movement to my palm trees with also some visual texture on the leaves. Thanks again for joining me today and creating your line rhythm sunset with palm trees along with me. I hope you had fun. Remember, if you are one of my students, you can take a picture of your artwork and email it to me, and maybe I'll feature it in a future Hooray Art video. But until next time, share this video with others or subscribe to my channel so you're up to date on other projects. Stay positive, always inspire, show creativity, and always be the best version of yourself. Have a great day.